everybody, for coming to the College Football Betting with Aaron Torres YouTube channel. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead, click that subscribe button. It helps our channel grow. It helps our audience grow. I appreciate it more than you know, as we're talking college football on this channel year round. Appreciate your support. Click that subscribe button. Friday night, beautiful South Bend, Indiana. And listen, first of all, let me say this before we even get started. I tweeted this out throughout the week, but of the 4 games, 3 of them are obviously in the upper Midwest with Columbus, Ohio, with Penn State obviously hosting a game, and Notre Dame as well. So weather is going to be a factor for all 3 of those games. It's going to be below freezing at kickoff. There's flurries in the weather forecast for the Penn State game. There's flurries in the forecast for Notre Dame, Indiana. So listen, I'm not going to spend too much time on the weather because the weather is going to be a factor at 3 of these 4 sites. But before we even get into this game, one thing I do want to talk about, I don't think it's really been talked about enough. Are we positive that Indiana fans aren't going to take over Notre Dame Stadium? Because it's interesting to me. We've spent the last 3 weeks talking about, or 2 weeks talking about, Tennessee going to Columbus. Is it going to be a Tennessee takeover? Well, spoiler alert for later in the show, kind of think it will be. But at the same time, what I don't hear a lot of people talking about, are we sure Indiana fans aren't going to take over Notre Dame Stadium? It's about a 3.5 hour drive. It's also worth noting this is the most expensive ticket on the market right now, about $460 for get-in price, over $1,000 a ticket for a pair of tickets. So it ain't cheap to get in. And listen, it's not like Notre Dame Stadium hasn't pseudo been taken over before. Remember what was it, about 6-7 years ago? I think it was 2017. Georgia goes to Notre Dame. It looked like a freaking Christmas tree. A lot of red, a lot of green. And I don't necessarily think that this game is going to be all that much different. I expect Curt Cignetti and the boys to bring a lot of fans to, again, a stadium that's only 3.5 hours from, obviously, Bloomington. But it's also worth noting that while it's only 3 hours from Bloomington, remember, there are IU fans all over that state, including in South Bend. Now, in terms of the game itself, a couple things stand out. Let's start with Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's really kind of an interesting team, right? One of the few teams, like I don't want to say we haven't seen them in high-profile games, but like the schedule just has not played out the way that we thought. USC was supposed to be a high-profile game to end the year. They kind of stink. Florida State had a historically bad year. Texas A&M was really like the last super high-profile game that Notre Dame has been in. Now, to be clear, they have some nice wins. Obviously, Army, Navy, both 10-plus win teams. Georgia Tech is obviously pretty good. They almost beat Georgia on the final day of the regular season. Louisville is good as well. But we just haven't seen Notre Dame in a lot of high-profile games. The one thing I will say, that defense is elite, okay? First of all, it's worth noting with Notre Dame, they do get back one of their most important defensive players, a defensive tackle by the name of Howard Cross. He is an X factor. He is a difference maker. He has been out basically since the beginning of November. He returns, and that defense has been phenomenal all year. Specifically, the secondary is really, really, really good. Notre Dame, so far this season, they actually rank number 1 in the country. Well, number 3 in in pass defense. Number 3 in pass defense. They're number 1 in opponent completion percentage. But also, here is the other interesting thing. They force a ton of turnovers. Notre Dame, as a team, has forced 28 turnovers. That is the most in college football. And then as far as the interceptions are concerned, they have forced right around the most interceptions in all of college football. So the defense is elite. That secondary is elite. They make plays. The one thing I will say about Notre Dame, I don't know exactly what to make of this offense. Now, the offense is really good. Like the defense, they're getting a key piece back. Jeremiah Love was a little bit banged up. He will return for this game. But I think we kind of just shoehorn the offense in as elite, as special, as whatever. It's been really productive, but what's been interesting is they really haven't asked Riley Leonard to pass the ball pretty much at all. You know that Riley Leonard, through 12 games as Notre Dame's quarterback, started every game this year. He has yet to have a game where he threw for over 250 yards in a game. Now, it's not, he's not dropping back 50 times and is just not getting the job done. They don't ask him to throw the ball a lot, but they're 101st in pass offense. They're 105th in pass attempts. They want to run the ball. But what makes it interesting, that Indiana defense, that Indiana run defense, Indiana has the number 1 ranked run defense in college football. You know who I know knows about it? Marcus Freeman, because he talked a lot about it in all of his press availability in the weeks leading up to this game. Let's get to Indiana. First of all, been a sad few weeks without Coach Signetti. Coach Sig. Coach Sig, oh, he ain't afraid to tell you exactly how he feels. It's been quiet without you, Coach Sig. We miss you, baby. Well, Coach Sig is back. This is an intriguing game. I saw he did an interview on Pat McAfee on Wednesday. He said, this ain't we're not coming for a participation trophy. We're coming to win this game. You look at the Indiana story, it's been told time and time again, 11-1. They're in this playoff. A couple great stories. Curtis Rourke, I thought it was funny speaking of the Pat McAfee interview. I don't know if he said it on McAfee or if he just said it in general in his media availability on Wednesday. He said, Curtis Rourke's Canadian. He loves throwing the ball in the snow. I hope it snows 1.5 feet because Curtis Rourke is going to be just fine. But what I will say about Indiana is I think because of this season and the narrative, I think we're kind of skewed on like who they are and what they've done well and what they haven't. I think two things are true about this Indiana team. I think they are probably a little bit underrated on defense, probably, frankly, a little bit, maybe even overrated on offense. Now, the overrated part is going to sound crazy. People are going to get mad. Torres, you don't know what you're talking about. This, that, the other thing. This is all I'll say about Indiana's offense, okay? And it's not that they're bad, but 51st in the country in rush offense. Not bad. Not bad. Not saying they're bad. 29th in the country in pass offense. Not saying they're bad at all. But what I will say is they're number 2 in scoring offense in college football, okay? So it's not often you have a team that is not top 25 in rushing, top 25 in passing, but number 2 in scoring. And a lot of that is taking advantage of turnovers, taking advantage of short fields. I'm not going to discredit them. I just don't think this offense is maybe quite as good as we think it is. And let's also remember this. The 2 biggest games of the year against the 2 best defenses that they faced, they really struggled. Michigan, I know Michigan struggled offensively all year. That defense ended up being a top 15, top 10 defense in college football when it was all said and done. Well, Indiana, if you remember that game, they win 20-16, I believe was the final score, 20-17, something like that. But in that game, they did not score a touchdown after the first series of the second quarter. So basically went, what is that, about 40 minutes of actual game time without scoring a touchdown. They get the win. I'm not trying to discredit them. It was a 20-15 win. So I think I said 2016, it was 20-15. But listen, they didn't move the ball up and down the field against Michigan. And then the Ohio State game, we all remember it was bad. They finished with 161 yards of offense. Oh, by the way, 70 of it came on the first drive of the game, in which it was obviously scripted and they were able to put the ball into the end zone. So you do some quick math. They basically did not move the ball all year or did not move the ball all game against Ohio State. Here's the thing, though, about Indiana. I actually think the defense is probably a little bit underrated as well. Mentioned they have the number 1 rush defense in college football. But here's the other part, is that they were good all year. And even if you go back to that Ohio State game, like I think there is such a revisionist history on how that Ohio State game actually happened. Now, part of the reason the final score was so one-sided, remember, Indiana throughout the year has not beaten themselves. Tied for second fewest turnovers in the country. They don't give the ball to the other team. They had 2 costly turnovers, the fumbled punt snap, obviously, or late in the first half, the punt return early in the second half. And so you just go down the list and they just gave Ohio State 14 points. What I don't think people remember, that defense was actually pretty good against Ohio State. Now, maybe it's an Ohio State problem. We'll get to Ohio State in a minute. But you look at that game, you understand that Ohio State did not break 300 yards of total offense until the final series of the game. You know that they did not break 100 yards rushing until Travion Henderson had a big run to seal the victory. Remember, they were what? It was the game was over, but Travion Henderson breaks a 35 yard run. They had 78 yards rushing on 28 carries before that carry. That comes out to about 2.5 yards per carry. And so when I look at this game, to me, it's actually pretty easy. Go ahead, give me the under in this game of 51.5. By the way, I think I mentioned it off the top. If I didn't, I'm a terrible host. Notre Dame, a 7.5 point favorite. Indiana, a over-under in this game is 51.5. But to go back to the decision, first of all, I think I might have said it earlier. If I didn't, I apologize. But 3 of these 4 games are going to be played in bad weather, okay? When you factor in Texas and how good they are on defense, I think you can argue the under is the right play on all 4 of these games. I'm not going to pick it for all 4 of these games, but this one, it does feel like the right decision. You look at these 2 teams. Notre Dame, that defense is elite, okay? That defense is elite. That defense is special. And as I said, Indiana, those two elite defenses that they faced throughout the year in Michigan and Ohio State, they struggle to move the football. That's not my opinion. It's a fact. And I don't know that it gets much better in this game. The counter to that, has Notre Dame faced a defense? They've probably faced a defense as good as this, but I'm not totally positive they have. And when I look at Notre Dame, they just, the thing about Notre Dame, like you think about some of these offenses that we'll see. SMU, clever, creative, multiple ways to beat you. Texas, multiple ways to beat you when things are clicking. Clemson, multiple ways to beat you. Even Penn State to a degree. Notre Dame doesn't feel like there's any secrets. They want to run the ball right at you. They've built this cold weather team, great O-line. It's what's happened since Brian Kelly was there, and I don't think it changes. It hasn't changed under Marcus Freeman, and I don't think it changes here. And so to me, I do think Notre Dame wins. I do think it's lower scoring than a lot of people think. I do think weather is going to play a factor, and I do think it's something in the neighborhood of 24-13 or something like that. I think it's super low scoring. I think Notre Dame wins at home. Go ahead and give me the under as the best bet of 51.5.